A very good evening to you. I'm Lisa Lord, and in our top stories, Barbados could reap significant benefits from the creation of a cruise alliance under consideration. Fisherfolk want some of their restrictions relaxed to give them greater opportunities to sell. Government's economic stimulation measures praised by the Barbados Private Sector Association. And in sports, a football coaching manual strategically launched amidst the COVID-19 lockdown.
Broadcasting from our studios in the Pine St. Michael, this is CBC Newsnight, starting now.
And in our top story, the creation of a Southern Caribbean Cruise Alliance is one of the key areas being considered by the newly established Tourism Recovery Task Force. And Tourism and International Transport Minister Carrie Simmons envisions Barbados being at the center of that arrangement. Sharika Griffith tells us more.
The notion of a Southern Caribbean Cruise Alliance is not new, according to Tourism and International Transport Minister Carrie Simmons, and he admits there's been little progress towards achieving it over the years. However, Minister Simmons believes an attractive itinerary can be created to give guests a rich multicultural experience, and it's an opportunity the Tourism Recovery Task Force will be looking at as it charts the future of cruise development in the region.
We are the country in the Eastern Caribbean that does the home porting, and we have access to almost every major gateway. But the reality is that we want to be able to say that in concert with the cultural uniqueness of a Dominica and the environmental uniqueness and attractiveness of a Dominica, in concert with the attractiveness of a Martinique, in concert with the attractiveness of parts of the Dutch Caribbean, Aruba and Curacao, etc., that you can get many cultural experiences, many environmental experiences, and having Barbados at the centerpiece of that.
Minister Simmons made the point during a virtual press conference to provide an update on the sector. Over the weekend, the director of the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association, Frank Comito, warned that some Caribbean hotels could collapse if international tour operators did not pay what they owed. The minister has confirmed that this is a very real and present danger for some local hotels, and one which is also being looked at by the task force.
There would be a payment window of, in some instances, 30 to 60 days in which you settle the bills after a tour has come down here. Now, once they fell into difficulty, their proposition would now be, give us 90 days, maybe give us 120 days. It is an unsustainable proposition as far as we are concerned. But the solution, and I don't want to anticipate where the committee will go, but the solution may well again have to be that we look within this region, especially at the private sector within this region, to help us become a little bit less reliant on external sources for assisting us in bringing our clients here.
He adds that while tourism officials remain in contact with major source markets, including the U.S., the prediction that the country's death toll could rise next month is cause for concern. He believes there's likely to be no recovery of the tourism sector until a COVID-19 vaccine is developed. In the meantime, he says staycations and intra-regional travel may be the safest form of tourism in the region. Sharika Griffith, CBC News.
Well, Barbados and countries across the region are being told that they should consider resuming cruise ship arrivals with caution. This is according to Director of Health Emergencies at the Pan American Health Organization, Dr. Cyril Ugarte. He says cruise ships have been linked to increased numbers of cases and transmission. As such, he says countries should ensure that certain steps have been taken.
Countries should engage with the cruise ship industry, particularly with those cruise ships that are coming into their shores, and to ensure that the engineering modifications inside the cruise ships has been done to reduce transmission, also to ensure that there is certain social distancing, and inform of which are the measures that are being taken, for example, in activities and in other actions inside the cruise ships. Also, the countries should be aware that when they receive many people, sometimes thousands of people on their shores, they should be also implementing social distancing measures when they arrive to their shores.
And Dr. Ugarte was speaking during a virtual media conference today to give an update on the rapidly evolving situation of COVID-19 in the Americas and PAHO's response to the pandemic. He says screening at the ports of entry will also be an issue.
It is important to highlight that the screening of patients and diagnostic and detection of cases are done mainly at the health services. From the more than 3 million people that are confirmed with COVID-19, very few, maybe less than 10 persons have been detected at the points of entry. So the screening that the testing that is available right now, it is very difficult to implement at the entry points.
Some fisher folk at the Bridgetown Fish Market are appealing to the government to rethink the operating hours in place. They say the reduced operating hours are leaving them with excess fish on their hands. Lorna Jones has more.
When our CBC team visited the Bridgetown Fisheries Complex around midday, there was lots of activity within the stalls as fisherfolk prepared a bounty of dolphin, tuna, and other fish. However, while there was plenty fish, there were no customers to be seen. Of course, this is in keeping with the current restrictions in place due to COVID-19 for the markets to be closed between the hours of 11 and 1. But fisherman Roger Graves says this restriction is resulting in an excess of fish on the market.
Walmart got 5 and 6 boxes of fish down there and can't get to sell. And the gate shutting for 2 hours. And when they shut for 2 hours, fish is nothing that could keep. You understand? When you take it off the ice and bring it out to sell it and you put it back in, it gives the people burnt out.
Vendor and boat owner Donna Phillips says it can cost as much as $4,000 in expenses to send out a boat. And with reduced sales, it's been hard for them.
Who must we sell the fish to? Or we must get off the fish, go on fish. We are donating fish, but we still need to sell some to get back our expense to go again. You understand?
The fisherfolk say with the current system, many people aren't coming to the market to avoid long hours waiting in the sun. They hope to meet with officials with a view to reviewing the process.
I would like the minister to come and talk to me or see what he could do about it. I don't feel the market should be closing. The market could go from 8 till 4. We're satisfied with that there, but not closing a market for 2 hours and we can't sell nothing.
For now, prices for dolphin range between $7 and $8 a pound, and tuna is at $8 a pound. Lorna Jones, CBC News.
Well, no new cases of COVID-19 were reported among the 91 tests conducted yesterday. The number of people diagnosed in Barbados remains at 82, and this includes the 7 persons who died. 1 person was expected to leave the isolation facility today after recovering from the illness. 47 people have now recovered, while 28 remain in isolation. The number of tests completed by the Besto Santos Public Health Lab up to yesterday was 2,549. Phase 2 of government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic kicked in yesterday with a new directive. In tonight's edition of Coping with COVID-19, Shane Jones takes a closer look at some of the added protocols to be observed.
Now, some people are still unsure of what they can and cannot do during Phase 2. One of the questions being asked a lot is about the alphabetical surname system. Yes, it still is in place and it will be enforced at banks, credit unions, public markets, which will include fruit, vegetables, fish and meat. Also fish markets, hardware stores, retail operators, supermarkets and mini-marts. So if you're going to any of those places, you still have to go on the day and at the time allocated for you. Now, there are some non-essential services that have reopened. You must also use your assigned days to access these services. Some of these include auto marts, automotive stores and workshops, bakeries and bread depots, beauty supply stores, bill payment services, butchers' shops, cleaning services, construction projects and allied businesses, delivery companies and people offering delivery services. Now, you can get a full range of non-essential services now available to the public on the Barbados Government Information Services website. Another hot-button topic has been places of religious worship. Now, while they have reopened, there are some strict measures. For funerals, there can be no more than 20 mourners, one officiant, the funeral director, and the necessary staff. For weddings, only the bride, bridegroom, official witnesses, and the marriage officer are permitted to assemble. In terms of streaming religious services, only 10 persons, including the officiant, shall be physically present at the church service. And one last point for this episode. Many people will be using public transportation again. Public service vehicles are limited to carrying 60% of their seating capacity, and no two passengers shall be allowed to sit side by side. Drivers, conductors, and passengers are required to wear face masks. All public service vehicles are required to be sanitized before and after boarding passengers at the terminals on your screen. These are some tips to help you cope with COVID-19.
The education system in Barbados has changed drastically in a short space of time as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, with classes shifting online. The Samuel Jacqueline Prescott Institute of Technology has, however, been ahead of the curve. Principal Ian Drake says staff members were trained 3 years ago on what is known as blended learning, which includes both classroom and online assessments. He says about 95% of staff stepped up to the plate immediately when they recognized that online teaching would be the only possibility at this time. Mr. Drake says tutors have been asked to take note of those students who may not have access to either devices or internet, as no one will be left behind.
There's some students we know that are vulnerable, that would not have gotten any material online because they don't have the wherewithal or the tools. And so we've said to the instructors, when you do your Zoom meetings, your Microsoft Teams meetings, who's not there, document this. This is where there's no attendance. When we reopen post-COVID, and we are planning for that, I will talk about that in a little while, we will have those students come back in and give them the requisite instruction and assessment.
The small number of Barbadians in Argentina are doing well at this time. Ambassador Gustavo Martinez Pandiani has been interacting with Barbadians in the South American country. He was speaking during CBC TV8's program Morning Barbados.
Just yesterday I spoke to probably the most notorious one, who is a young fellow, very nice guy, Mr. Banfield, who is kind of in love with Argentina as I'm in love with Barbados. He can speak not only Spanish, he can speak Argentinian Spanish, which is a different one. And it's a pleasure to talk to him because he's like a Belgian speaking Argentinian, and we share a lot of stuff, not only about football, but also about everything from both countries. But everyone is safe. Fortunately, we have a very stable situation now with the pandemic in Argentina.
The ambassador adds new programs will be developed between Barbados and Argentina post-COVID-19. He says one area identified for cooperation is the milk industry.
Yesterday, I was speaking with the BIDC, and they were telling me about this problem they're facing with the milk industry. Apparently, it's an important crisis now facing the Barbados industry of milk. So I contacted my government, my Minister of Agriculture here in Argentina, and I just request some help from our friends. And they confirmed they're willing to give a hand and to try to transfer the technology we have. We have developed a very strong milk industry during the we have been doing some work with Mexico, and I just use that opportunity to benefit Barbados. I think that is what I have to do. Every time I see an opportunity for Barbados, I take it.
The countdown is on to the fourth installment of Clap Barbados, the initiative aimed at showing appreciation for those on the front line of the fight against COVID-19. Each week, key groups are being recognized, with healthcare workers, security and emergency personnel and farmers among those saluted so far. And come tomorrow at 6 p.m., Barbadians have been invited to come out and show their appreciation for all essential government services, particularly Prime Minister Mia Amor Motley and her team.
all the essential services of the government that we are giving thanks to and recognition to. And as Derek correctly said, especially the Honorable Mayor Motley, especially to give support, and that's what we're coming out tomorrow at 6 o'clock to do, to give support for her outstanding and extraordinary work that she has been doing and all her efforts that she has put in to hold this nation together during its biggest threat, the COVID-19.
Mr. Baird revealed next week the theme will be a Caribbean clap to include essential workers throughout the region. The organizers introduced a competition element last week and are considering extending the deadline as the response has been overwhelming. Well, frequent hand washing has been one of the main ways health officials say people can protect themselves from contracting COVID-19. But a local dermatologist is cautioning that excessive hand washing can damage the skin's barrier. In this Sharika Griffith report, Dr. Andrew Ford explains how we can avoid this problem while staying safe.
The skin barrier blocks potentially damaging chemicals and irritants. Organisms linked to the immune system live on the skin and carry out important functions. Dermatologist Andrew Ford says excessive hand washing or use of hand sanitizers can break down the skin barrier and get rid of useful bacteria. This in turn can cause irritation to the skin.
The chemicals that are in soaps, they can be fragrances, you can also have dyes and also other chemicals. These can cause irritant reactions or you can also get an allergic reaction. And a dermatitis can take the form, as I said, of redness. You can get little blisters, you can get dryness, and the skin gets more sensitive, and you can get an itchy rash on the skin. The skin sanitizers pose a different threat as they contain mostly alcohol, and that alcohol also kind of damages the skin barrier and can lead to similar difficulties.
According to Dr. Ford, excessive hand washing can also lead to aging of the skin. So what can you do to minimize the likelihood of these problems occurring? Keeping the skin moisturized is key.
If you have normal skin that isn't dry, you can use a lotion type moisturizer or a creamy moisturizer. If your skin is very dry, you need to use something that's very oily or greasy. The ingredients, as you say, depends on your sensitivity. If you're very sensitive, then you have to try to use products that don't have in fragrances and also dyes and that sort of thing, or you want to use something that says hypoallergenic. There are simple moisturizers that any of us can have access to without going to all the fancy brands. Is Vaseline, and any white cream without perfume should suffice.
Dr. Ford also wants people to pay attention to the ingredients in their hand sanitizers.
There's a chemical called triclosan that's in some hand sanitizers, and that has been found to have effects on the immune function of the skin and also sometimes some uncommon hormonal effects. So you should look at what you're using in your hand sanitizer. Also make sure your hand sanitizer has a moisturizer in it or something that's called a humectant. So that can be like aloe vera or glycerin. They're helpful.
When available, Dr. Ford says it would be better to use soap and water, which is less harsh than hand sanitizer. And remember, moisturize, moisturize, moisturize. Sharika Griffith, CBC News.
Still to come, the much anticipated Guyana election recount begins tomorrow. But before we get there, here is that tip from Cooperators General Insurance.
This tip of the day is brought to you by Cooperators General Insurance Company Limited. Insurance the way you want it to be.
Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds, especially after you have been in a public place or after blowing your nose, coughing, or sneezing. Cooperators General Insurance, encouraging you to stay home and stay safe. Regional news now. The long-awaited national recount of votes cast in the March 2nd general and regional elections in Guyana will get underway tomorrow. A team from Regional Group in CARICOM is on the ground in Georgetown. President David Granger welcomed the announcement of a date for the start of the recount, noting that he will abide by the result.
The entire nation is awaiting the completion of the recount of the ballots and the declaration of the results by the Elections Commission. I have said repeatedly that I shall accept the declaration of the results by the Elections Commission, which will allow for a democratically elected government to be sworn into office. The general and regional elections were free, fair, and orderly. Subsequent events resulted in the prolongation of the electoral process well beyond the deadline for the declaration of results. That prolongation was occasioned by a delay owing to legal challenges in the Supreme Court of Judicature and the Court of Appeal. I have complied always with the rulings of the courts. I have never interfered, intervened, or intruded in the work of the Elections Commission. Its independence is respected, and I've upheld always the Constitution of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana.
In the Bahamas now, Minister of Health Dr. Dwayne Sands has resigned after breaching COVID-19 protocols last week and allowing American residents to enter the country. Dr. Sands tendered his resignation to the Prime Minister, Dr. Hubert Minnis.
Dr. Sands said that he accepts responsibility for this breach of protocol and acknowledged that he acted outside of the scope of his authority. Dr. Sands said his actions were guided by his great desire to obtain the much-needed testing swabs, which he said are in short supply both here and internationally, and are key in local efforts to trace the spread of the coronavirus so as to better focus the country's response. Dr. Sands said at all times he acted in good faith. He said he acknowledges that his actions have caused embarrassment, for which he expressed his sincere regret. He added that he believes that his continued presence in the cabinet may serve as a distraction from government's efforts in fighting the pandemic, hence offering his resignation.